Hey, I'm Bob at ILikeToMakeStuff. Today I'm going to show you how to make a copy of your favorite toy. I started with some corrugated plastic for this, but you could also use foam core. I measured out a rough size for my figure and then added a ½ inch to each side of it. Using that width, I made 4 sections the same size. The height here doesn't really matter, you just have to make sure that it's quite a bit taller than the actual item that you're trying to mold. Then I used that same piece to trace out a square to use for the bottom. I hot glued on my figure head first. This is the point where you're going to pour resin in later, but right now it's on the bottom. I used some hot glue to also attach the pieces to make a box. This doesn't have to be pretty, but you do want to make sure that you get everything sealed up as well as you can. Now you're ready to pour the mold. I got this Umu 30 from Inventables, and it's really easy to use because it's a 1-to-1 mixture. So as long as you have equal parts between the 2 different cans, you're good. I put them in clear cups next to each other so I didn't actually have to measure them, I could just visually see that they were the same amount. And then I poured those into a larger bucket and mixed them up. The mixing process takes a little while because you want to make sure that you get as much out of the cups into the bucket as you can, but then you want to make sure that you get it mixed really well. You want to scrape off the sides, scrape off the bottom, and spend some time to get rid of all the swirls in the color. You want it to be a uniform color throughout. At this point, if you had access to a vacuum chamber, you would want to pull all the air bubbles out of the silicone before you poured it, but I don't have one. So instead, I tried to stretch it out as I poured it in to get rid of some of the air bubbles as it was thinned out. This worked pretty well, but obviously you can see that there's still some bubbles down there. After it was all cured, I just tore away the outside of the mold. This happens really easily, and then you end up with a nice block of silicone. Then I used a blade to cut a serpentine pattern down 2 sides of it. This blade worked alright, but I think a long skinny one like a scalpel would work even better. You want to make sure that you don't tear the silicone. You want to cut it so that it goes back together nicely when you go to make your cast. I took my time to cut around all the details and any of the undercuts like the armpits or the hands. Once I got it all loose enough, the figure popped right out. It was really cool looking at the inside of the mold because all the details, every single little thing was there. And it fit back together really nicely. I sprayed some mold release on the inside of the mold and tried to cover all the surfaces so that the cast item will come out easier. I taped up the mold to keep it closed for the next step and used pieces of wood to distribute the stress from the tape. You don't want it to squish the mold, you just want it to hold it closed. To make the cast, I used a urethane resin. It's also a 1-to-1 mixture just like the mold. I did it equally in 2 clear cups and then poured it together, making sure to mix it really well. Then I just poured it into the mold. It really doesn't take very much, and you want to make sure that you spin the mold around to get it in all the little nooks and crannies. That helps the air bubbles to get pushed up to the top so that they end up popping out of the opening at the top of the mold. When that happens, you'll need to add a little bit more to fill the gap. Now once that cured, which took quite a while, it's really just a matter of popping it out of the mold, just like the original figure. There's problems here and there, but overall, it worked really well. Now, I had never done any mold making, so I learned a whole lot in doing research for this project. I learned that there's tons of different materials that you can use both for the mold and for the cast. And each one of those materials has different properties. Curing time, demold time, hardness, softness, there's all sorts of different things that you really need to research depending on what you want to use your final cast for and how often you're going to use your mold. And if you had a vacuum chamber, you could get rid of all the air bubbles in both of these materials. That would make your molds a lot tighter and more exact on the inside, and it would make your casts, in this case, a lot clearer because all of this frosting is actually tiny little bubbles. And like I said, there's a ton of different materials you could use for the cast itself. This is a resin, but you could use wax, you could use anything, and you could colorize it to make it whatever color you want. You could even use silicone, similar to the stuff that you use for the mold, and you would end up with a stretchy action figure, which would be pretty cool. So not only could you copy something that you buy, but if you made something, really in-depth carving or something like that, and you wanted to be able to reproduce those in a different material, this would be a perfect process to use to be able to reproduce some of your work. So like I said, this is totally new to me and I don't have a ton of experience in it, but if you have some more experience, please share some tips and tricks down in the comments below. If you like this video, I would love to know about it, and I have a lot more stuff here that you can check out, and if you want to help support this and help me make more of these videos, check out my Patreon page right down here. Thanks for watching, guys. See you next time.